constitution like that of Namibia. But I wish to mention in the same manner that before the 2016 Constitution, Amendment number 2 was undertaken, it was in a way, as you remember, that President Edgar Lungu then did not govern the country for 3 years. No. It was a very short period, but he managed to sign the constitution and we are using it. Suddenly, some colleagues have forgotten that it was within the powers of the legislature then to enact that constitution. Why was it within their powers? It is because legislative powers, as enshrined in the constitution under Article 62, is vested in the legislature. And their mandate to legislate commences from the time they are sworn in on the floor of parliament to the time parliament is dissolved. The only time they do not possess such powers is after dissolution of parliament. Within the period or the confines of this mandate, they are able to amend or legislate. They are able to make laws. So we've had discussions where people are saying, hey, you're talking about amending the constitution before the elections. It should be made very clear that the constitution is not a political document. It is a governance document. And it should not be tied to some electoral process. But it must be done within the ambit of the law. There is nothing illegal if at all a bill is taken to parliament with an inclusive approach. Most importantly, some people have asserted that part of the UPND mandate was only constitutional recovery, which is not right. Because among the issues that UPND talked about include an amendment to the Electoral Process Act. Secondly, when it comes to issues that relate to law, restoration of the rule of law and upholding of human rights, including amendment to the constitution. Because when the president spoke in Kasama, he spoke in the spirit of the International Women's Day with a clear reference to proportional representation. The idea is that he is assuring women that in his capacity and many others, we don't disagree to the idea that there should be more women in parliament. We don't. So he said, I hope we are agreed on the fundamental issue of proportional representation. The reason is simple. Even those that are on the other side, our colleagues, they do appreciate proportional representation and they talk about it. If you recall, in Bill 10, proportional representation was there and they spoke of proportional representation very highly. So we have no doubt. Other countries have done it, like South Africa, and they are able to get women there. The idea is to have an express provision in the constitution so that women can be better represented. We also wish to reiterate that it is understood that men and women, in a quest for us to meet the threshold of the International Convention on Gender Equality, cannot be given or subjected to an equal footing in this particular political contestation. There should be a positive discrimination or affirmative action. But again, that is not sufficient. There is need for express provisions in the Constitution. It is right to have a conversation because that's what befits a successful democratic dispensation. They can agree, they can disagree. I think the issue should be whether or not proportional representation is something that we can support as a country. But what we have seen is a deliberate arm twisting of focusing on the whole constitution arising from Kasama, that all citizens are agreed to amend the whole constitution. The president didn't say that. The issue was about women there. Said, I hope we are agreed. That's why we need to support the amendment to the constitution. But in amending the constitution, you're basically looking at specific contents. And there's nothing wrong with that. So to have an argument that the time is short doesn't make sense, because then we have short memories. We know that ECL had a very short time in leadership. In that same period, he managed to ensure that the constitution was amended, and this is the constitution we are using. And just the year before the elections, they managed to amend the constitution. And that is why we were wondering whether ministers needed to remain in parliament or not, using the amended constitution. Today, the situation is different. We have insufficient time. People believe there's no time. There's no time for who? Then secondly, you are not citing any law. You ask those that are opposed to what we are saying. They must cite a law, whether there is a law that stops Parliament from amending any law in Zambia when they are within their constitutional mandate. I have already told you, and I've thrown a challenge, that the constitutional mandate of the legislature goes up to dissolution of Parliament. And true to the fact, while that is going on, there are many other inclusive processes, as the president has promised, that whatever law reforms we shall undertake shall be inclusive. They will not be devoid of inclusivity. To demonstrate, we have the ongoing Electoral Process Act. Our colleagues in the opposition have made submissions. There is also the Public Gathering Bill. They have made submissions. Why are they not telling you that that process should be stopped? Because that is law reform. We also know that the constitution that we have been using has created more problems as much as it has progressive clauses. It has created problems because of gaps. Now, we should not always subject gaps to the court system, that they should be left to make a decision. Otherwise, we will end up in a situation, as the case may be, on eligibility. We are having backs and forth. Instead, there should be more focus on express provisions. The constitution should not always be interpreted by implication or by mischief, because there are all those rules of statutory interpretation. There should at least be literal provisions. They should be clear and understandable even to an ordinary citizen. So there is no foul play in the amendment of the constitution, because the president has no power to amend the constitution, number one. Two, the political party cannot amend the constitution. The ones that have legislative powers is the legislature or the National Assembly. I thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues in the media. We're now calling upon questions. We'll take three. So you introduce yourself, the media house that you represent, then you ask the MD on what he has talked about. You can see a hand there. Two. Okay, let's start with you.
Sharon, will find us. There's been a video that's circulating from area media, as on the Rwanda, alleging that constitutional amendments will mean that the Zambians will not vote for a president in 2026. You'd like to speak to that?
Now, those are the things we're talking about. Emotional blackmail. It's not right. I mean, I've already told you. How can you have no elections? Let me perhaps go slightly backward by indicating that the only time you create a problem, I want you to understand, friends, is where Parliament, through a constitutional act, because for you to amend the constitution, there must be a constitutional act. Okay? Because the constitution has not provided a roadmap for its own destruction. There should be a constitutional act. You remember there was a constitutional act for the constitution. The constitutional act allows us, friends, for the transitioning of the new constitution or an amended constitution and the extent of application. At a point as the Parliament will be, passing this constitutional act, what will be the status of the constitution in terms of application? So the Constitutional Act will enable you to say it will remain applicable and all its clauses until the next amended constitution is adopted and assented to by the president. So those are contained in the Constitutional Act. Now, the only time that you would never have elections constitutionally is where you overthrow the constitution. Overthrowing the constitution, friends, is treason. And there are circumstances under which this constitution can be set aside without treason. And it can only happen in countries where there is war. That's when it's set aside. So what he's talking about is neither here nor there. It does not make sense in the first place. It's not adding up. Because the legislatures, in the previous judgment, they vacate Parliament How many days, how many months before the elections? Huh? Correct. So now you can understand the differences in understanding between our friends and ourselves. So in that 90 days, what is going on? How can MPs be so naive that they would go up to a period when they are dissolved? In other words, what you are saying is that in the 90 days we have no constitution. Is it making sense? It's not making sense. Meaning then if there is no constitution, the question is, what has happened to it? What has happened to it? So we should not deceive citizens by mere speculation. I believe we can do better constitutionally. We are wasting time of citizens to reflect on progressive clauses. Instead, if we had individuals that are serious with governance issues, they could have been discussing contents. That one of the things they would love to see before they retire from politics is to see such clauses. Is to see that we sustain what we have and improve on what is not there. Such as proportional representation. Such as including those that persons living with disabilities, that they should be in parliament by constitution. The provisions we have are so weak in terms of including those persons with disabilities. They are open-ended. The power is just it's subjective in a way. There should be a clear, compelling clause to allow for our brothers and sisters living with disabilities to be part of the governance process and represent their aspirations. There should be clear provisions allowing women, how many women, and in the constitution it must be in no uncertain terms, be clear. Maybe you say there shall be a minimum of 40% or 50% of women in parliament. Meaning, come rain, come sunshine, there should be 50 women there. That's what the president would want to see. But those that don't mean well, perhaps they have not even read international conventions on gender equality. They are opposed to that. They should also have time to read the national gender policy. Then they will know where the country is headed to. And the president is simply responding to the various conventions Zambia has signed many years before he became president on gender equality. Because you can't have a situation where there are more women electorates than men, but when it comes to positions, they should be the minority. It's not making sense at all. And that's the country in which we are. Many countries have crossed that boundary. Many of you who have time to look at what happens in other countries may agree with me. So why should women be used only as rubber stamps to see men to the top? And as we speak, according to the recent publication by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, there are more female voters than men. But there are more men occupying decision-making positions than women. Why should it be the case? The president is saying, we need to change. Women are adding value to the country. So the people that are opposed are against women. That's what they are doing. Thank you.
Yes, brother.
My name is Roland Kalango from Hot FM. My question is, from 2022 to March, somewhere 2023, Zambia Law Development Agency has started a roadmap towards the amendment of the Constitution. Then, the then Minister of Justice, Mr. Lambo Haime, clearly indicated that government had no resources to amend the Constitution, which was more like a stance for the government. What has changed now?
I think it is an issue of the time when the exercise must commence. Nothing has changed on promising citizens that there is need for us to have a constitution that will not quarrel within itself. Okay? And nothing has changed except the issue of resources is a reality. All of us know that the UPND took over a government with a depleted treasury. How do we demonstrate that? That is why retirees were not paid. That's why Indeni was closed indefinitely. That's why we were able to stop all the projects that had not exceeded 80%. And that was officially made on the floor of parliament by Dr. Wariangan, that all the projects that did not exceed 80% must stop. Government had no money. So, assuming leadership, the first budget that the UPND government came up with is 2022. Thank you very much for that question. So they are just coming in. And as they are coming in, they are beginning debt restructuring. You cannot be extravagant. On the other hand, you are asking for the people you owe money to relax the conditions of the loan. They will not listen to you. I'm sure you're making a point there. So there are a number of restraining activities that necessitated that decision. So I should make it very clear that the statement was in black and white as you have asked, my brother. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. By the way, that is my student. So I should be proud, huh? That's my student there. Yes.
I'd like to find out when the lacunas that you intend to make available to the public, for them to be able to report. Because I'm aware, don't just talk about the inclusivity and the gender equality. I'm sure there are other clauses that will be part of the name. Secondly, I'd like to find out how you intend to react to the misinformation and disinformation that is going about in the arrangement. Because if people do not understand what they will reject it. So that's our question. Let's find out where you're going to make the changes that you want to make habit to the whole, to the general public, and how you're going to handle the misinformation.
Now, let me say this. Thank you very much. You see, the challenge that we have as a country, like I mentioned, that the Constitution has not given itself a roadmap for its destruction. We do not have a law that provides a roadmap for amending the Constitution. For a very long time, we have been using the Inquiries Act. That's what the president has been using to get views from members of the public from the time of the one-party participatory democracy. As a result, you had a situation where all amendments that we have had, the president to use this power given to him by the Inquiries Act to set up a team to get views from the people. And it should be made very clear that there will be no gaps that will be taken to the citizens by government, because then we lose the direction. Citizens must decide what should be done to the Constitution. Of course, there should be a role that the media must play, because they are also stakeholders. When people are moving forward, backward on a particular judgment, then there is something wrong we need to cure. And to cure that, we must remove whatever gaps are there. So, the Minister of Justice, in due course, will have to give a statement with regard to the constitutional amendments. Okay, when this can be done, when the exercises can be done, and so on and so forth. I'm sure the interesting part that we have is that we have had so many CRCs which have contained almost the same views that we receive from people. That is why President Sata had to use the Mumomba CRC as a benchmark for establishing the 2016 constitutional amendments. So, in due course, when the time is right, the Minister of Justice will address the nation with regard to amendments. But citizens should not be scared of anything, because they are the owners of the documents. Views must come from them. If citizens at some point to say, let's move this to after elections, a decision will be made based on what the citizens are going to say. But then, we are also saying we must postpone certain things. I'll give you an example. Delimitation. Our colleagues are saying they are trying to use delimitation to manipulate the Constitution. How can you reason like that? Because the Constitution is the one which prescribes the number of members of Parliament. So, to increase the number, you must change that provision. Because in the Constitution, it will say 156. Okay? So, you need to change it. In case you are not aware, friends, I want to go back to this issue of amendments in a different way. South Africa, way back when their population was around 30-something million, they have had the number of the members of Parliament are 400. 400 members of Parliament. And we are moving towards that. Now, here is the problem. In terms of ratios, you cannot have 156 people, like in a classroom at a primary school, representing over 20 million people. The trend nationwide, the general practice is that the size of the population should start moving based on the population of the country, so that people are well represented. And no wonder you are hearing cases of MPs not being seen in particular constituencies, because some places are so vast. You have an example of, yes, you are moving from a constituency from Kitwe to Kapiri. Even if you are rich as an MP, you can't explore the whole area. Then it would also mean, if they are scattered like that, the distance to school, the distance to hospitals will still be long for citizens. So So there are specific fundamental issues that inform amendments in terms of delimitation. 1, population. 2, geographical area. So look at Lusaka. Lusaka district has 7 constituencies. It is the only district in the whole country with 7 constituencies. You get the point? But then, what is the reasoning? It is the population. There are many people that need to be represented. Otherwise, legislatures will be pulling in one direction, citizens will be also talking about something else. And to pick information from them will be difficult. You have seen those National Assembly offices that are put in each constituencies. Is it normal in Kanyama to have one office with such a huge population, which is equivalent to the populations of some countries? A very small office, smaller than this room. But look at the population there. And which normal MOP would want to get views from people for consultation for such a population? It doesn't make sense. That's why President Michael Sata had to come up with another province called Muchinga. Do you know what it has done? Northern province alone has 13 constituencies. Do you get the point? Now, if you go back to the time Muchinga was part of Northern province, you discover that they had less than 18 constituencies or less than 15 constituencies. But today, you'll be talking about maybe 8 constituencies in Muchinga plus 13 constituencies in Northern. When you put them together, they are more than 20. What that has done is that Mpika will be a different place altogether. Towns begin developing. And now, Chinsadi will have the first ever airport, which would not have been talked about had that province not been established. And now, because there are a number of constituencies that have been set up in that particular province, it means they can now get the 36.1 million CDF, which they wouldn't have gotten had you stuck to the old order of things. So, let me end by stating, friends, that there is nothing to fear. In due course, government to announce the processes. It's not the first time we're amending the constitution. And I've already told you there's nothing like the election is closer. We can use ECA as an example. They enacted the 2016 constitution, even when we know that that was his first term and it was too short. And we went for 2016 general elections with 50% plus 1. When he ruled for a very short time, in the very short time, they had to look for a constitution which went missing. Remember, we were told that the document went missing. They knew what they were doing in the bedroom when they said that. But then afterwards, they told us that no, we have seen it. Then we asked them a question. Since it was missing, you have not told us where you found it and what it was doing and who took it there. The debate subsidized anyway. But the point is, they cannot come back and tell us that the time is closed. They are blackmailing citizens. You should also ask them, how did you enact the 2016 election constitution when you did not rule for more than 3 years? Let them give us the answer. And they should tell us whether what they put up is a very bad document. Then we'll be on the same platform. Bill 10, in case you've forgotten, a year before the elections, we were debating about Bill 10. Have you forgotten? 6 months before the elections, we were debating about Bill 10, friends, with intent to knock out certain political competitors. 6 months before the elections, we were debating about Bill 10. Now they are forgotten. So when we say these are hypocrites, it's because the name befits them. We are not being malicious. Are we together? I think let me end here before we start. We move out. We allow others.
Yes.
Yes.
My brother. The last one.
You're called Dakahen.
Yes.
Okay.
They're given by parents.
Oh, beautiful.
Media. I'm coming from Kumweso.
Kumweso. Awesome. You're welcome, my brother. You can come even from social media. UPND wants information to go because you are providing a platform. Please proceed.
My question is actually answered.
Yes.
I wanted to find out, looking at the issue of the Bill 10, it was fought because obviously the majority Zambians didn't understand what was in there. And probably there was information that was not balanced for people to really accept and understand what is really there. So, like I said, you have answered partially the question. So the the constitutional issue, some section of society are saying, as a party in government, where are your priorities? Why so much focus on the constitution and not the cost of living, which is affecting most citizens today? Why is there so much energy on this and not
Before you respond, we allow him.
Maybe let me deal with it because before you lose it, it's a very important question. I think our agenda is very clear. If we prioritize the constitution, we could have amended it a long time ago. But it is coming now because it was not a priority. What was the priority? It was free education. It was CDF to move from 1.6 million to 36.1 million. It was skills training for carpentry, agriculture, general agriculture, welding, tailoring, among other issues. Our priority was partly debt restructuring, because with that debt restructuring, the president told you, all our dividends, all our goals were going to be frustrated. Our priority was, first of all, to restore the strength of our economy and in terms of GDP. Because our GDP was negative, about the negative 2.5. From the time we took over, it has never been in negatives. There is no country anywhere that ever developed where the GDP is in negatives. The first thing you do is to first of all normalize the situation. Then when you normalize the situation, you start fighting. It goes up, down, until now you nail it. Now you can start making projections. Our priority was free education. Well, our priority was to reintroduce meal allowances. Our priority, my brother, was to revamp the mining sector so that over 20,000 citizens that lost jobs on the cover belt can get them back. Our priority was for us to have control of our economy to the extent that we should now be able to pay debt. And you heard from the Minister of Finance that they are able to announce how much we are paying in terms of debt servicing. Our priority again was to unify the country, that citizens should stop hacking each other, and you friends stop covering bloodshed. People stop using branded and registered guns around. That was our priority. Our priority was to see to it that there should never be someone who will be arrested for criticizing the government. But you'd only hear of a person being arrested because they broke the law. Did you hear the difference? That we should, like the president promised, that he would not want to go through what he went through. So I think we have answered the question by saying those were the priorities and we are seeing them. And that's why it has come late, because it's not a priority.
Yes, my brother. The last one.
Good morning.
Morning, my brother.
Content digest. Yes, the truth or the fact is that the more reason why we're having this constitutional crisis is because the current constitution has got lacunas. Why? Because this document was handed to us by our colonial masters. So in the nutshell, the constitution which we are using is colonial oriented, which was designed to create confusions among us. So besides the 1996 amendment as well as the 2016, would you advocate, as you clearly did, would you advocate for a complete overhaul of the constitution so that we come up with a document which is going to speak to the interest of Zambians, unlike using a document which is slavery oriented? Thank you.
That's a question from our friend. Now, I think it's important for us to contextualize issues. That, friends, the time we took over leadership as an independent country, we had a choice to make. And even now, we have had choices to make. Are we governing ourselves? Yes. Now, it is not every law that we acquired which is bad. Okay? And like a general practice world over, many countries that were once colonized tend to attune their legislation to their colonial masters in terms of architecture. That's why we have the British law, the British acts, remember the Extension Act, English law, and all those things. Okay? For example, when you're dealing with contract law is universal almost the whole world. But it's an acquired law. You get the point? When you're dealing with criminal law, for example, Many of the things that are in the Penal Code, Cap 87 of the laws of Zambia, were acquired. If you check inside there, each clause has the year when it was enacted. You find some of them 1937. But the question you ask yourself is that if theft was bad at the time of the colonial masters, it cannot be good simply because we want to rule ourselves. And then we get rid of the law on theft. Then we are deceiving ourselves. We would be fair to ourselves to indicate that making laws is within our powers. If we believe whatever we inherited is bad, it is still within our powers. That is why we say, we the people of Zambia, not we who were colonized. No, that's not what it says. But we the people of Zambia. And I think it can be answered in the context of saying, in my view, I don't think it's right for us to talk about an overhaul, because we have put in place many clauses that we like. Those we don't like, let citizens say we don't like this and they remove it. Democracy is the rule of the people. Let the people decide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. We are done. Thank you so much for your patience and your time. Looking forward to